one more part here that I wanted to play as well.
The general election, and two moments take us behind the scenes on them that I think were inflection points. One, when Vice President Harris went on The View and said that she wouldn't do anything different than President Biden. I know the Trump team was celebratory about that. And then also you got some new reporting from Bill Clinton, the former president, talking about what he shorthanded as the trans ad, which we have discussed here was very harmful to Democrats and played in Pennsylvania and other swing states. Talk to us about what he had to say.
Well, Bill Clinton is sitting there watching football games on Sunday, seeing this trans ad appear again and again and again. At the same time, he's working rope lines. He's talking to voters. He's trying to find out, take the temperature, as Bill Clinton does. And he's hearing from people that they are not happy with what is happening. They want the campaign to respond to the trans ad. It is going unresponded, and he picks up the phone and is trying to call everyone he can, and he calls Jen O'Malley Dillon in one scene that we have in the book. He's sitting in a hotel room in California, and he dials her up and he says, listen, I'm hearing this, you guys need to fix this, and he's got a good finger on the pulse. Usually this is something Bill Clinton does, and Bill Clinton was told that the data didn't indicate that they were okay, and so I think there was a lot of concern obviously brewing behind the scenes that this ad was killing them.
Well, that ad.
Here's another thing that we're seeing. There does also seem to be some type of a split happening within the Democratic Party, where some feel as though the trans issue is not helping Democrats, and some Democrats feel like, well, no, this is helping us. You're starting to see that split. You saw Gavin Newsom. Now all of a sudden he feels differently about that particular issue, and he's getting like crap for that, right? Seth Moulton, congressman from my state, Massachusetts, also has now come out against that. Now he's getting crap for that. So you guys notice like the split that's happening here. There's the Democratic Party people say it's a Big Ten. Sometimes a Big Ten isn't always the best thing. And that's why I said I really do believe, had we started something in 2016 after they cheated Bernie, the DNC cheated Bernie, I really do believe that if there were a separate party for progressive policies, it would probably be really thriving by now. Because that was 2016 and it's now 2025. I really do believe that. So I don't know. I mean, it's so many different things now. Like now you look back and you look at what could have been done and what people were asking to get done. And some people feel that it's a little, too late for that now. But the reality is it could have been done. So now you end up with this issue. And then there's a little bit more because, like I said, they're doing a podcast tour. So they're going on to different shows. I'm not going to tell you everything that's in the book. But they also went on to Chris Cuomo's show. Listen to a little bit here as well.
The book comes out tomorrow called Fight Inside the Wildest Battle for the White House. Details the drama unfolding behind the scenes in the last year's presidential election. One of the authors, Amy Parnes, joins me now. Congratulations on the book. So why do you want people to read the book? The first sell is the shock that the ticket Walz and Harris felt on election night. What do you know?
Listen to this.
Well, we know that they were shocked, completely surprised by the events that unfolded on election night. They thought they were going to win. And, when they were told that they were losing in the final hours and that they had lost, there was complete silence and shock, and they were just dumbfounded by what was happening. But, Chris, I think people should read this book because John and I are journalists in the truest sense. We call balls and strikes. We are not one-sided. This is a book that Democrats can learn from. This is a book that Republicans will enjoy because you can watch the train wreck. Everyone gains from reading this book.
I like the sell. The role of Biden, Amy, there are two schools. One is he was resistant to the change and stayed resistant throughout. The second was he was resistant to the change, and then he said, all right, I'm going out, but it's going to be Harris, and that he didn't want a primary. What did you find out?
Yeah. Well, so we know that there is a secret meeting going on in the final minutes before President Biden drops out at the time. It's at the Naval Observatory. It's in Kamala Harris's pool house there. Her advisors, her closest advisors, are gathered, and they're talking about what happens when and if Joe Biden drops out. We find out that he does drop out there, and one of her aides rushes in to be with her. Biden doesn't want to immediately endorse her. He wants to kind of let the moment sink in and then endorse her a couple of days later. And she says, no, I need your endorsement right now.
That part right there, that's another part that we were not privy to. When Kamala Harris talked about the story and when Joe Biden was interviewed and he talked about how this exchange went down, passing the torch over to her, both of them said that, Joe contacted Kamala and said, I want you to be the nominee. I think it's time for me to, skedoodle, long story short, and I'm going to endorse her. When Kamala Harris had that interview, remember she said that. She said that, and he offered me his endorsement. Turns out that's not really the way things went down. Turns out she had to ask him for it, and he wasn't ready to give it to her. So now we know Biden didn't want to endorse her. Obama didn't. Well, we knew Obama did. Biden didn't want to endorse her. Obama didn't want to endorse her. And these are the types of things that, going back to 2024 presidential election, had people had known this, Kamala Harris might have gotten more support. Think about that. If people knew that Biden and Obama were doing this behind the scenes, she may have gotten more support. I mean, this book came out anyway. So when people didn't know, they're going to know now. So when I ask you who's to blame, I want you to think about something for just a second. Those things happened with Obama and Biden. And throw Pelosi in there too. But at the end of the day, it was Kamala Harris's campaign. Kamala Harris could have went scorched earth. And if I was Kamala, this is what I would have done. If I was in that situation, here's what I would have done. Number one, I would have made it very clear and publicly known that they didn't want to endorse me. I don't give a damn. That's why you don't see me there. That's why they wouldn't have me there. I would have made it known. I'm sorry, but they don't want to give me their support. Hell, she might have gotten sympathy votes for that. Second thing I would have done, number one, I would have definitely distanced myself from Joe Biden as much as possible. There was a reason why internal polls were showing that he was going to lose to Donald Trump and Donald Trump could win 400 electoral college votes. As much as possible. Definitely should have went a different direction on Gaza than Joe Biden was willing to go. Definitely should have had a working class agenda. All you had to do was look at the Bernie blueprint, and then I would have, obviously, you add reparations to that. 3, should have started campaigning in black communities, since the Democratic Party, you can't win unless you have the black vote. But no, she didn't want to do that. Didn't want to do that. And she lost the black vote. That's why she lost. That's a big part of why. She got less support from black voters than Hillary and Joe Biden. I told you guys, no black agenda. Black voters are continuing to not show up to vote for these candidates. I'm not messing around when I say this. So that's another thing. And here's the other damn thing. If I were in that position, I would have contacted Jill Stein. I know they contacted Cornel West, but Jill Stein at that time with the Green Party, Jill Stein had more ballot access. I wouldn't have had sicked AOC on them to shame the Green Party or third party voters. I would have contacted Jill Stein and Cornel West and Claudia De La Cruz and tried to work with them and build a broader coalition. That's what I would have done. Not just, let's just pretend they're not around. Oh, hell no. I would have tried to work with them. Because you see, unlike Kamala, Jill Stein went to Dearborn, Michigan. Dr. West went to Dearborn, Michigan. They went there. You stayed away. So what Obama and Joe Biden did was wrong, fucked up. But honestly, it kind of reminds me like business is just cutthroat. That's how business can be. And politics is even worse. That's what it sounds like to me. That being said, if I was Kamala, I would have came forward all that ish. Let everybody know. Let them know. Could you imagine how people would have felt if they would have heard that Obama didn't want her? Ooh. That would have turned so differently. People mad at Obama anyway. But those are things that she could have done. And that's why I said you can't sit up here and blame the voters. Like, especially considering during the genocide, the people who obviously were going to get support from people who were very, very upset about what was happening in Gaza, Jill Stein won the Muslim vote. Now, that's a community that the Democratic Party won in 2020, and they somehow have to figure out how to get back. And I don't know how they're going to get that community back, considering the fact that you can't win Michigan without them. I mean, it's just common. Then there's black men. You look at the numbers. A lot of black women showed up. Not as many black men as they did in 2020. Why didn't you go meet with? It just is so weird to me. Like, in my mind, if I am in that position, I know where to go. That you can't blame on Obama. That you can't blame on Biden. Don't get me wrong, they still corrupt and sneaky as shit. But you can't blame them for everything. It's just common sense to me. Common damn sense. Look at where you start. Look at where you end up. But they didn't want her there. And in fact, what that book goes on to reveal is that Barack Obama wanted Gretchen Whitmer and Westmore. That's the ticket he wanted. The black governor of Maryland, who's raising taxes there, by the way. I got family and friends in Maryland. Hello. And Gretchen Whitmer, who talks really weird and looks like she's constipated. That's who he wanted to be the ticket. Obama thinks that would have worked. I don't think they would have won.
This is Sabrina Salvati, Sabby Sabs.
A little bit more here.
She's out of Massachusetts.
Things that could have been done.
Do you believe which story do you believe more? That the Pelosi and the party said it has to be Harris, or that Biden wanted to pick who it would be?
I think that Pelosi and the party, they were very squeamish on Harris going in. We have reporting in the book that says he goes, she goes. I think a lot of people wanted a primary, but it was a little too late for that.
And that is kind of payback to the Democratic Party. She said a lot of people wanted a primary, but when you had the opportunity to have one, y'all shut it down. And you guys said that Biden is the candidate. This book, I think that everybody should check out. And no, I'm not sponsored by these people.
Good question.
I'm not sponsored by these people. None of them told me to promote this book. But I think regardless of your political ideology, maybe you should read that book. Because it'll show you just how corrupt the damn system is, how it's so corrupt. They're doing the podcast tour to promote the book. So you can find them in a number of places. But I don't think that this book is going to look good for Obama.
Yeah.
Who do you think is to blame? Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.
Send me an email at heykevdude@gmail.com and let me know your main channel name, because I don't go through the comments on the after the live stream finishes. J13, please, and I guess I'll unban you. So send me an email at heykevdude@gmail.com. Yeah, then I'll look at you. I have a lot of people banned that I don't know. I'm going to have to do a mass unbanning just for the F of it, you know? Oh, man. Snakes Sabo. Yeah, follow me on kick.com, guys. I'll be in the Kick chat too, looking at stuff. The Random Gamer Dude, alright. Good to see you in the chat, man. Hey there, hey now. So I'm doing deliveries again, guys. I just was noticing the chat's on the screen now. Is that? Oh, that's on both of them too, huh? I don't know. Is that just on YouTube or am I on Kick? Oh yeah, it's on the YouTube one too. Did I pass it? Oh, I gotta make a U-turn. What do I have to do? Oh, yeah, I passed it now. Because it's on the right side. Sycamore. Oh man. Let's see what we can do. Sycamore's on the side. Okay, I got it. Okay. That's what happened. Better be about the mega life. Okay. Make America great again, man. How about the mega and maha life? Man, I really overshot this tree, huh? I guess, but it was. I don't think you can make a left here, can you? Or no? I don't know. I don't think so. This is Sycamore. There's the bread there too. Oh, I know where I'm at. We're close to the Ralphs here. 175. That's right here. This is right here. All right. This is the Jukyang. Definitely a juice area, which is fine, but okay, let me see here. Let me see, if I hit the chat thing, will I take the chat off the high chat? Let's see. still stays on the screen, huh? Let's see what's going on. Twisted Sister. Hey, what's up,
Vince
WW?
Neil has really let himself go. Yeah.
The genre that got perhaps the most mixed reactions from that side of the metal community. For as much as there were bands that got singled out pretty consistently when bashing the genre, such as Poison, Warrant, Enough's Enough, Trickster, and maybe even... there was a surprising number of bands from the glam scene that these people would make an exception for, to the point where I made a video back in the day that was essentially just made to say, consistency! For as much as these people liked scoffing at glam for how over-the-top their image and stage presence was, and how they felt their musicianship paled in comparison to metal subgenres like thrash metal, traditional heavy metal, and even power metal, they would give a pass to bands like Rat, Dokken, Van Halen, Quiet Riot, Wasp, Twisted Sister, Skid Row, Scorpions, and early Def Leppard like Prehysteria. But the band that would consistently be cited as the exception to glam metal sucking, sometimes even called the only good band or the heaviest band the genre had to offer, is the band we're discussing today, Motley Crue. That's pretty much the reason I didn't think I would have to do a video for this series on them. I mean, why would I need to make one when enough people are saying,
That's right, keep moving!
You know what? Yeah.
Except you stay.
more than any other band in the genre, they're the one that even metal elitists will get behind. So what is making them worthy of coverage in this series? Especially since much of the general complaints about the genre they're from were touched on in the very first video I made for this series on Poison. It mostly boils down to two main things: how Crue are perceived by outsiders, and how the last couple or so decades have seen them on a, for lack of a better term, downward spiral. There have definitely been a considerable amount of developments in the history of Motley Crue compared to if I decided to make this video 10 years ago, but I'm getting way too ahead of myself, so let's go back to the beginning. Motley Crue is yet another band I have Guitar Hero to thank for exposing me to them. I've made it known before that my favorite of all the Guitar Hero games is Guitar Hero 2, with how much bigger and more varied of a soundtrack it has, improvements in the controls and graphics, the addition of new features such as co-op mode and practice mode, and loads more improvements over the first game that made it so much more fun to play. The first song in the first tier of the setlist is Shout at the Devil. I wouldn't say I was blown away by the song my first time playing compared to other songs in the game, but what I do remember thinking was that it certainly made for a pretty eclectic opening song. The riffs and lead lines were exciting enough to have me looking forward to what else the game had to offer, and it wasn't long before it became one of the first songs from the game I bought on iTunes, along with the likes of Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses, Crazy on You by Heart, Cherry Pie by Warrant, Killin' in the Name by Rage Against the Machine, Hangar 18 by Megadeth, Freebird by Leonard Skinner, and my favorite song in the game that of course also topped my favorite instrumental songs video, YYZ by Rush. Of course, with this in mind, Crew was also responsible for giving me my first taste of hair metal, but they weren't the band that made me fall in love with it. It's a common misconception that Motley Crue invented glam metal, but its roots trace back to the 70s. One band that's commonly cited as laying the groundwork for the image and attitude associated with the genre is the glam punk band the New York Dolls. There's no denying that without this over-the-top band, bands such as Crew wouldn't have sported makeup and tight clothing, but the band I always saw as inventing the glam metal sound is none other than Van Halen. I'm gonna play a song from a glam band in the 80s, and then a song from Van Halen's first album. Understood why people refuse to credit Van Halen as the inventors of the style when this should really speak for itself. While there were plenty of hard rock bands in the 70s that dozens of bands in the glam scene would take influence from, like Kiss, Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, and Aerosmith, Van Halen was always the band I felt was the biggest influence on the sound. The scorching riffs, the juicy guitar tone, the boomy drum sound, and of course, the wild solos. No other band sounded like them at the time, and they became a band that just about every metal band in the 80s wanted to emulate. They wanted a David Lee Roth for their vocalist. They wanted an Alex Van Halen for their drummer. They wanted someone to play bass. But most of all, they wanted an Edward Van Halen playing guitar.
Wild Stallions will never be a super band until we have Eddie Van Halen on guitar.
My best guess as to why people don't like acknowledging Van Halen as the first glam metal band is because they debuted in the 70s, while glam metal is seen as more of an 80s thing. Once again, compare Van Halen's sound with a band like Dokken or Winger, and you'll find enough similarities that you'll have no choice but to concede. Van Halen were the band that really got me intrigued by the glam sound, especially with their version of You Really Got Me being another song in Guitar Hero 2. I remember my first time listening to Eruption on the compilation CD my uncle included in the giant collection of compilations he burned for me, and being quite literally dumbfounded at what it was that I was hearing. But Motley Crue is the band that I see as having planted the seed for my love for the genre to grow and grow and grow over the next 2 to 3 years. They were never my favorite hair band, but it was not hard at all for me to understand why they were among the bands that were respected the most in that scene, let alone with the kinds of stories there are about them. Whenever I talk about glam in my videos, I like referencing this book, American Hair Metal by Stephen Blush, which I ironically found in Seattle of all places. Along with giving a general retrospective of the history of glam and the culture of the time, the book contains lots of photos of many of the bands, pictures of memorabilia, and even fan art and fan letters that were printed in magazines at the time, and quotes from many of the band's members to help paint a picture of what the time was like for them. A lot of focus is given to Motley Crue in this book, and I'll give some examples of it throughout this video. But one quote that always stuck out to me is this one from a guy named Corky Gunn, the vocalist of a band called Sweet Pain, that really puts into perspective how big of a deal Crue were in the scene. I can honestly say that nobody partied harder than Motley Crue. Any story you've heard of them is probably not crazy enough. After a while, it wasn't about sex anymore for the guys because they had so much of it. It became about who could do the wildest stuff. I remember they'd get girls to do stuff like have the phone receiver up inside them as they would call their mothers. Notice how unlike the rest of the quotes in the book, this one isn't dated, which implies to me that it was recent at the time of the book's publication in 2006. That should say something about the lasting impact Crue made. But as revered as they were by their peers, there were also negative portrayals of the band that also spoke volumes as to how on top of the world they were in the 80s. Aerosmith's comeback hit Dude Looks Like a Lady was written about an experience with Vince Neil. Iron Maiden frontman Bruce Dickinson's debut solo single, Tattooed Millionaire, is believed to have been written about Nikki Sixx. And I always had this theory that Money for Nothing by Dire Straits was written about Motley Crue as well. You know that one verse in the song that everyone brings up when claiming the song aged poorly? You know which one. Derogatory language aside, think about it. Ian in the makeup, that's his own hair. The song is about the resentment working class people feel towards musicians on MTV living the easy life, not having to perform the laborious tasks they do. But this is clearly referring to a hair band. This song came out in 1985, and what hair band was mega omnipresent at the time? Motley Crue. It wouldn't make sense for that verse to be referring to a band like Def Leppard or Quiet Riot or Rat, because Crue was much more out there at that time. Twisted Sister I could kind of see an argument for with how freaky Dee Snider looked, but I always saw Motley Crue as being a much bigger band than them. They were a band that was hard to ignore throughout the decade, and as threatened as Crue felt by bands like Poison and Bon Jovi rising up in the mid-80s, such as when they complained about Jovi soaking up much of the spotlight at the 1989 Moscow Music Peace Festival, they still managed to maintain their relevance and reputation as kings of the scene. Even if I would say bands like White Lion, Extreme, Dokken, Winger, and Stryper might have more talented members, you can still see the talent present in Motley Crue. Let's just say there's a reason they're the main band even people that don't like glam oftentimes get behind. Even if you've never heard their music before, you'll probably have a good idea of what they sound like. Vince Neil, aka Vincent Neil Wharton, has one of the most recognizable voices in the genre. Much like I've said about Dave Mustaine in my Megadeth video, there's this snarl in his voice that gives it a lot of power and character that you don't hear with many other glam vocalists. There's a hint of a rasp in his voice as well, but unlike with vocalists such as Stephen Pearcy of Rat, Blackie Lawless of Wasp, and Steve Whiteman of Kix, it doesn't come across as at all overbearing. Plus, you'd be hard-pressed to find a performance like the one Vince gives at the end of one of my favorite Crue songs, Dancing on Glass.
Dancing on glass.
On the surface, it might not seem like Tommy Lee, aka Thomas Lee Bass, is as bombastic and dynamic of a drummer as the likes of Bobby Blotzer of Rat, Rod Morgenstein of Winger, Ainsley Dunbar or Tommy Aldridge when they were in Whitesnake, John Fowler of Steelheart, may God rest his soul, or even Rick Allen, the one-armed drummer of Def Leppard. But in addition to the size of the kit Tommy played, he keeps consistently good time, slams hard, and throws in creative fills. And I always like the sound he gets when he plays on the ride cymbal. Credit there should also be given to their longtime producer, Tom Warman, for bringing that sound out. But the big thing that made Tommy Lee such a standout drummer was his acrobatics. There's some phenomenal drummers I can think of, but you'd be hard-pressed to name one that plays a drum solo while strapped to a drum roller coaster that spins and turns him upside down, at least at the time. When I saw Motley Crue live in 2011 when they put their differences with Poison aside and co-headlined with them, the roller coaster drum solo might not have been as crazy as I anticipated, but I nonetheless recognized the skill that goes in to do such a thing, and he even brought a kid to ride the roller coaster with him. I was certainly jealous. With Nicky Sixx, aka Frank Carlton Serafino Ferrana Jr., I always felt his bass parts were good, but my favorite thing about the role he plays in Motley Crue is that he's the primary songwriter. The other members do have their share of contributions to the music or even the lyrics, but Sixx is the one constant, which I've always believed is a crucial component to what makes Crue's songs as fun as they are. But of course I'd be remiss if I didn't share the one fact about Nicky Sixx that remains one of my favorite pieces of trivia, next to Jim Cummings finishing Scar's vocals on Be Prepared in The Lion King after Jeremy Irons' voice gave out. You see, Nicky is one of what I imagine to be a very small number of people that have died and came back to life. He's like the in-between of the two Jesuses. Crue did a lot of drugs in their day, but hardly anyone went as hard as Nicky Sixx. On December 23rd, 1987, he overdosed on heroin and was declared clinically dead for about 2 minutes before the paramedic, who was a huge Motley Crue fan, revived him with a big ol' shot of adrenaline to the heart. This experience was of course the inspiration behind one of Crue's biggest and most recognizable of songs, Kickstart My Heart, because Sixx's heart was quite literally kickstarted. Another part of the American hair metal book I always found really interesting is during a chapter that focuses on the drugs and alcohol that the guys in the band's all engaged with. There's one page titled, Why Do You Think They Call It Dope?, named of course after the song by Love Hate, that shows Sixx flip-flopping on doing drugs throughout the years that really paints a picture of the kind of patterns he had. 1985.
The fans understand that the drugs, the sex, the drinking, and the excessive lifestyle are reflected in Motley Crue's music.
1986.
We just want to get laid and get wasted.
1987.
I don't do drugs. I think drugs are bad.
Drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs.
1988.
We really thrive on the word sleazy. Everybody has groupies, gets drunk, does drugs.
Hey,
Everybody
at the
has
Wilton,
wild sex. We are just very
lined
honest.
up. What's
We admit
going on
it.
tonight?
Eventually.
I don't do drugs. I don't
roll
do drugs.
auto?
I
No,
wish
what do we got?
people would get that
Never heard about
through
that.
their heads.
Drugs are bad. You shouldn't do drugs.
1989.
I was totally addicted to heroin and went through rehab.
as hell. Kicking drugs seemed impossible to do.
1990.
Kicking drugs has been as exciting as getting strung out on them used to be.
Yeah, the first rehab didn't work.
While you could argue that some of these responses came as the result of wanting to look good to the media and that there may be some denial on his end as well, I'd say the timing lines up with that near-death experience. Being pronounced dead, even if it was only for 2 minutes, was enough of a wake-up call that Six had to seek rehab. But as you saw, that only helped so much. Thankfully, he did go on to commit to getting clean and has been sober for 22 years as of last year. His battles with addiction are also reflected on in his more modern-sounding side project, 6 AM, particularly on their 2007 debut, The Heroin Diaries, which also serves as a companion piece, or soundtrack, to Six's autobiography that came out the same year. But it goes without saying that my favorite member of the band, and the person that I view as being the main talent of the band, is Mick
Mars, dude.
aka Robert Allen Deal. While Vince, Nicky, and Tommy got much of the attention as the rowdy characters they were, Mick Mars always struck me as being the more laid-back and quiet guy in the band, which led me to view him as being the guy with the most class of the four and putting the music first. There are certainly guitarists in glam metal that I see as being more virtuosic, but along with Nicky Sixx's writing and Vince Neil's vocal inflections, Mick Mars' guitar playing is what gives Cruise songs perhaps the most character. He may not be a shredder like Vito Bratta of White Lion or Nuno Bettencourt of Extreme, but so many of his riffs and solos are so slick and even have some bluesy flair to them, which distinguishes his playing from a lot of his peers in the scene. He's the main reason why my favorite Motley Crue song is Looks That Kill. In addition to the riff and the chorus having some chromatic ascension to it, listen to how wild the solo is. By the way, doesn't that riff I played a bit ago remind you of this? He's played tons more cool solos in Cruise songs, but none have matched Looks That Kill for me. One other thing that makes the writing and the riffs in Cruise songs distinct from the pack is the tuning they play in. When you listen to just about any glam metal band, they're playing in one of two tunings. They're either playing in E standard with the strings tuned to E, A, D, G, B, and E, or they're playing a half step down with the strings tuned to E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, B flat, and E flat. A big part of why E flat standard is my favorite tuning that I like having my guitars in is because so many glam metal bands like playing in that tuning, so they can play in keys like E flat, A flat, D flat, or C sharp, G flat, or F sharp, or even my favorite key, F minor, in the F sharp position on the fretboard, but Crue tune lower. Rather than E standard or E flat standard, they play in D standard with the strings tuned to D, G, C, F, A, and D. Much like I talked about in my Korn video, this gives their songs a much darker edge and an interesting flavor that you don't really hear with many other bands in the genre. A lot of their songs are in either D minor or G minor, but they're played in the E and A positions on the fretboard. Like take Girls, 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 for example, one of the only Motley Crue songs I've taught myself to play. Here's how it would sound in E standard. Now here's how it sounds in the proper tuning, a whole step down. It does a better job giving a sense that the boys are looking for trouble to get into in their night on the town. That's a step up, it would have sounded a lot more generic. So playing in D standard gives Cruise songs loads more character than you realize. Speaking of which, now let's go through their albums. It's not like I can't understand where people get the idea that Motley Crue invented glam metal from, considering their debut, Too Fast for Love, came out in 1981, when the genre was just beginning to get a foothold in the mainstream. It actually didn't come out much long after the band formed the same year, when Tommy Lee recruited Nicky Sixx after seeing him with his previous band, London, a band that's best known for functioning as the starting ground for a number of musicians from the LA scene, including Blackie Lawless of Wasp, Fred Curry of Cinderella, and Izzy Stradlin of Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, well, this is like the training school for rock stars. Yeah. It's like we get somebody in the band, and as soon as they leave, they become rock stars.
Sixx had a lot of material that was rejected by London, and when Mick Mars and Vince Neil were brought into the fold, they came out with the album that's seen as being the but in the midst of that, you can tell that something big and special was brewing. My favorite track on the album would of course be the ever so pounding and driven Live Wire. But the other tracks I view as standout include Public Enemy No. 1, Take Me to the Top, Piece of Your Action, the title track,
On with the show!
and Stick to Your Guns, which maybe that band got their name from, probably not. 1983's Shout at the Devil, however, is the album that really broke them out, and it's the album many would argue is Cru's best. It's my second favorite. My favorite will come later, but I definitely see it as one of the most memorable albums. Kind of like what I talked about in my Blink-182 video about how albums like Dude Ranch and Take Off Your Pants and Jacket function as bridging gap albums in the evolution of Blink's sound. A big reason why Shout at the Devil is a good candidate for Motley Crue's best album is because it functions as the bridging gap between the raw sound on Too Fast for Love and the more glossy sound on their next releases. There's still rawness present, but the execution is a lot stronger now that the band have a better idea of what their sound is going to be like, and it certainly blew things up for them and made them the household name that they were. But what also helped was Cru becoming one of the first targets of the PMRC at this time. We all know that this is the group that prompted the Senate hearing that John Denver, Frank Zappa, and of course Dee Snider of Twisted Sister famously testified at, that resulted in the parental advisory sticker you see on a lot of albums today. And I'm sure you all are familiar with the group's Filthy 15 list that was put together after Tipper Gore, the group's founder, caught her daughter listening to Darling Nikki by Prince and getting absolutely mortified at the song's lyrics. A number of heavy metal acts of the early 80s were included on this Filthy 15 list, including Venom with Possessed, Black Sabbath with Trashed, Twisted Sister with We're Not Gonna Take It, Def Leppard with High and Dry, Merciful Fate with Into the Coven, Judas Priest with Eat Me Alive, and of course Wasp with Animal. So with Motley Crue having an album called Shout at the Devil out, it shouldn't shock you at all that this would rile the feathers of the conservative fundamentalist Christians that the 80s were chock full of. You'd think the title track would be the song they'd go after, but the song the PMRC ended up putting on their list was Bastard, because I guess it had more bad words, oh no. But as the Streisand effect teaches us, giving something like this negative attention only makes people more curious to check it out! And check it out they did. If you didn't know Motley Crue by the time they came out with Too Fast for Love, you definitely knew them now. Some of their best and most iconic songs are on this album. I already said that the title track made for a great introduction for me back in the day, and that's basically how I feel about the album as a whole. More than any other album of theirs, I would say Shout at the Devil is the best starting point for anyone getting into them. In addition to the title track and Looks That Kill, you also have the aforementioned Bastard, Red Hot, the very catchy Too Young to Fall in Love, Knock 'Em Dead Kid, 10 Seconds to Love, and Now, I said at the beginning of this video that Motley Crue is a glam metal band that even people that don't like the genre will bat for. But within that camp are the people that will only bat for Too Fast for Love and Shout at the Devil when they say that. Starting with Theater of Pain in 1985, the albums had more of a gloss to them compared to the previous two albums. I've never found it to be that much of a stretch musically, but something did feel different. The main factor I always saw as turning those people off is the fact that this is the album that features Cru's first ever power ballad, Home Sweet Home. Power ballads have been a phenomenon in rock as far back as songs like Led Zeppelin's Stairway to Heaven and Aerosmith's Dream On. But I look at Home Sweet Home as being a song that really helped to popularize the concept in glam, even if it might not have been the first. Even if ballads aren't your thing, and even if you think Cru's ballads aren't that great, even by glam standards, it's important to recognize the emotion being conveyed in the music that helped the song to sound quite a bit more genuine than some of the ballads that would come later in the decade. It's worth mentioning that one thing that happened around this time that many speculate is factoring into why things went the way they did with this album was Vince Neil's involvement in a drunk driving accident on December 8th, 1984 that resulted in the death of his friend, Nicholas Razzle Dingley, the drummer of Hanoi Rocks. He was charged with vehicular manslaughter and driving under the influence and was sentenced to 30 days in jail and 5 years probation, along with paying $2.6 million in restitution to the victims of the car crash and performing 200 hours of community service. To say the least, it was an unfortunate turn of events considering how young Razzle was and how Hanoi Rocks was just on the verge of finding success in the American market before the screeching halt took place. Some may see this as Vince getting off easy, especially considering he made parole after 15 days for good behavior, but a situation like this was bound to leave an impact on him mentally, and in the end, Theater of Pain ended up being dedicated to Razzle. Now that being said, of Cru's initial 90s and early 2000s, but he isn't a bad producer, just not the best producer to be working with Metallica. But he can produce a pretty great hard rock record. See what I did there? He's produced the Cult's Sonic Temple, Bon Jovi's Keep the Faith, David Lee Roth's Little Ain't Enough, Kingdom Come's self-titled Gettin' Any, The Offspring's Rise and Fall Raging Grace, and American Band produced their one and only album. My point being, even if you don't like the albums he made with Metallica, trust me, I don't either. His touch more than paid off with Dr. Feelgood. It's for sure my favorite thing he's ever produced, with Keep the Faith being a very close second. But there's one other thing that makes this album special. As we've established before, Nikki Sixx is Cru's primary songwriter, but if you look at the writer's credits in the track listing, you'll see a name you don't really see much for writer's credits on the other albums next to nearly all the songs: Mick Mars. I believe it's his input that gives the songs a very particular taste. On songs like Rattlesnake Shake, Sticky Sweet, the bonus track Get It For Free with its wicked slide solo, and my favorite track on the album, Slice of Your Pie, you can hear a lot more bluesy flavor and mix playing than ever heard on the previous albums. While Shout at the Devil is a good starting point for people new to Motley Crue, hey, that rhymes. The zest Mick brings to the writing, clashing with Six's approach, and the personality in Vince Neil's vocals on these songs are what really make this Motley Crue's best album in my eyes. I don't even care that there are not one, not two, but 3 ballads on the album with Without You, Don't Go Away, Mad Just Go Away, and Time for Change, which some may see as overdoing it. Dr. Feelgood really is peak Crue to me. And the only other tracks I haven't mentioned, not counting the TNT, Terror, and Tinseltown intro track, are Same Old Situation and She Goes Down, and they're both awesome too. I also want to take some time to talk about another album that I don't think gets the recognition it deserves. The early 90s are a time that's often associated with glam metal's decline in popularity. There have been numerous instances of a new sound or musical trend whose rise to prominence served as a rejection of the previous era's sound, but none felt as catastrophic as the changing tides of 1991 to 1992. It's easy to blame Nirvana on the rise of grunge and alternative music for the musical shift going on, irrespective of how it actually helped rock to be fresh and relevant in the mainstream. I know I used to. But another factor that made this such a miserable time for these bands was the dysfunction within many of the bands themselves. You got a taste of what this was like in the Crybabies of Rock video I did on Don Dokken back in 2016, when I talked about the battle of egos between he and George Lynch, and a similar thing happened with Crue in 1992. Hey, that rhymes. It's disputed whether Vince Neil was fired or if he quit, but no matter what, he was out of the band and replaced with John Corabi of The Scream, a band I talked about in that Glam Metal Bands You Never Heard Of video, to sing on the band's 1994 self-titled album that nobody remembers. So what did Vince do? He went solo. He had already written a song with the help of the Damn Yankees duo of Styx's Tommy Shaw and Night Ranger's Jack Blades called You're Invited But Your Friend Can't Come, which was featured in the 1992 film Encino Man. But he was also writing material for a solo album with former Ozzy Osbourne and Beggars and Thieves bassist Phil Susan. Susan would leave the band due to differences with the ace virtuoso guitarist Vince hired on, Steve Stevens, who's best known for playing with Billy Idol, and who also had a solo album out in addition to playing guitar on the Top Gun anthem. Stevens cranked out a bunch more material with Vince while the rest of the lineup got rounded up. Recruited were Dave Marshall on rhythm guitar, Robbie Crane on bass, who would go on to play with Rat and Lynch Mob, and Vicky Fox of Enough's Enough on drums. Much like I've said about Don Dokken's solo album Up From the Ashes, Vince's album Exposed captures so much of Motley Crue's sound, it might as well be an unofficial Crue album. And Steve Stevens playing does so much to elevate the songs. Listen to how nuts he goes on my favorite song on the album, the opening track, Look in Her Eyes.
Yeah, listen, I got a DoorDash pickup for Taiwan. Okay, that's it.
This guy played with Billy Idol. My other favorites on the album are Sister of Pain, Can't Have Your Cake, the cover of Set Me Free by Sweet, Livin' As a Luxury, and of course my very close second favorite, The Edge. Did the album do well commercially? Kinda. Didn't do bad numbers for 1993, which is impressive for a glam act at this time. I've always seen 1992 as the genre's final really big year, one thing that makes it my favorite year for music in the 90s, so it's kind of rare that an album from after that year has as good of a reputation as it does. Between this and the album Crue made with John Corabi, Exposed is without a doubt the infinitely superior album that I highly implore you to check out if you haven't heard it. But while we're I think this is as good a time as ever to segue into the portion of the video where we debunk the flag. There's my Vince Neil impression. This is going to be one of those weird what's wrong with, structurally speaking. I've pretty much addressed the most common complaints given to their 80s albums already throughout this video. And I also mentioned already that Motley Crue is one of the only glam metal bands that metal fans of different varieties can come together on appreciating. Plus, similar to what I said in my Bon Jovi video, Crue are one of a very small number of bands from that scene that have been able to have legitimate longevity in the post-Nirvana world after the 80s were long over. On the surface, this seems like one of those videos that'll end the way my What's Wrong Withs usually do when I ask what's wrong with the band, where the implied answer is nothing. I'll still be implementing my usual brand of devil's advocacy, but we're gonna have to venture to some dark territories in this video that there may not be much of a defense I have for Crue doing. The seed was planted in the 90s, but over the last decade or so, Motley Crue has been on a downward spiral. I know I'm such a poser for using this gag. I'll start with the thing I'd say is the easiest to overlook. Just about every band I've done a video on in this series has that one album or string of albums that's seen as the one no one wants to acknowledge. For Metallica, it's Saint Anger and Lulu. For Green Day, it's Uno Dos and Tre and maybe Father of All. For Megadeth, it's Risk and Super Collider. For Korn, it's The Path of Totality. The worst I could say about the few albums Motley Crue put out after the 80s is that they're kind of forgettable. But none have the level of infamy of 1997's Generation Swine, or as I like calling it, Generation Swine Flu. Remember Swine Flu? God, the late 2000s sucked. This is an album that comes immediately to mind when we think of how bad of a time the 90s were for bands from the 80s. A number of glam bands tried and failed at making more grungy-sounding records to keep up with the times, but none were as memorable of failures as this album from the band that ruled the scene a decade prior. The big issue with Generation Swine is that it has no idea what it wants to be. It felt like Crue was straining to sound modern for the time, while having enough of their classic characteristics to not sound incredibly unrecognizable. Not helping was their decision that clearly came at the behest of their manager and record execs to get rid of John Corabi during the album's production, and get Vince back in the band, as that seemed to be the surefire way to drum up publicity for the album. But the band's chemistry wasn't what it was, and they were each in a much different place than they were the previous decade. There are even moments where Nikki Sixx and Tommy Lee sing lead vocals, and it just adds to the weird disconnect that plagues the album's writing and production. If you want to learn more about Generation Swine and how weird of a time this was, Todd in the Shadows did a Train Records on it, and it's probably my favorite one he's done. But the only other thing I really have to say about it is that it can at least be disregarded without much pushback from anyone, and it's not like it has an overwhelming presence. When I saw Motley Crue in 2011, the only songs they played that weren't from the 80s were Primal Scream from the Decade of Decadence compilation album, and the title track from their 2008 album, Saints of Los Angeles. Fitting title, for sure. On the note of Saints of Los Angeles, that's actually their most recent album. I've heard they're working on new music, but just like what the main point behind my What's Wrong With on AC/DC was, you kind of wish that wasn't the case. One reason why is Vince Neil's voice. Within the camp of people that don't like hair metal but will vouch for Crue, and even within the camp within that camp that only like the first two albums, there are people that say, Motley Crue is good, but they'd be so much better without Vince Neil.
Man.
Personally, I really don't have an issue with his voice on those albums, as it does a lot to give Crue songs their attitude and character, and it's not like you really see these people hype up the John Corabi album, so it's hard to say what the deal really is. But I wouldn't be talking about Vince here were it not for this.
What? What did he say?
Aging is one of the scariest inevitabilities that life has to offer.
I should know.
And it's depressing to observe, seeing a performer degrade to a shell of their former self. It's not uncommon for bands of this era to play in lower tunings to accommodate for the singer being unable to hit the notes that they used to. Back in my Whitesnake retrospective, I mentioned that when I saw them live in 2015, in addition to playing the songs in a lower tuning, David Coverdale substituted the high notes with what sounded like metalcore screams for this exact reason. He put effort into coming up with a workaround for his aging vocal cords, whereas Vince just wasn't trying at all and mumbling his way through the performance like a late 2010s rapper. Maybe he was having an off day, or maybe he'd been drinking a bit too much before the show, or maybe he'd been singing Kickstart My Heart for so long that he felt he could just put himself on autopilot. But from what others have told me that saw Crue live in recent times, that wasn't an isolated incident. It makes me glad I was at least able to see them in 2011 before things got worse, especially considering the messier things that have happened in recent times. Not putting on the best of live performances when you're this deep in your career is definitely a valid reason for a band to retire. But as I talked about in the AC/DC video, declining health is an even more valid reason. It's been known for quite a while that Mick Mars has been having the worst health of the four, struggling with a form of arthritis called ankylosing spondylitis, which affects the spine and pelvis. This, of course, had a negative effect on Mick's ability to play live, leading him to retire from touring in 2022, while stating that he has no intention to stop recording music, let alone playing guitar. However, the rest of the band wanted to continue touring, especially since the stadium tour they were doing with Def Leppard, Poison, and Joan Jett was making the kind of profits most bands could only dream of earning. So they quickly opted to replace him with former Marilyn Manson, Rob Zombie, and solo virtuoso guitarist John Five. This led Mick to speculate that the band was planning to do this for a while, given his declining health.
Yeah, man, I get tired of listening to stuff. That guy's voice is a little bit irritating to listen to. Let's see what this live on Kick. Let's see what the kids are up to. San Fernando. Crazies at Fat Camp. Exploring Japan. Boomy's got 4 people, man. What's up with that? See what these kids are up to. Oh, they're effing. Sounds pretty bad.
My stomach's hurting now. That's what wasabi did with my stomach.
Guys are sleeping. How come this guy doesn't use the sidewalk? You freak. Jesus, yeah. Lazy to use the sidewalk. Firewall. Oh man, this guy's turning left. Fucking A, dude. Should put your blinkers on. You freak. Actually, I should probably go up. Take 1660s on the freaking dumbass street, man. down. Oh, this guy I think was behind me. By now, it should be good.
Well, no. We're not there yet. All of our stomachs hurt.
More challenges in
じゃあ今から虫買いに行くんですか？虫売ってる。前にやったら
Kind of boring stuff, man.
Ginger go, there she is.
Man, what's going on?
So let's get into this guy. So I will confess, I have not heard of this guy before. But
well, that was a live stream I saw.
Wes Watson, he's my coach. How do people come to the conclusion that this guy is a better?
His legacy is always like Shaq, 2,000 interceptions. biggest scandals in sports history. And now, with new details coming to light, it's sparking fresh discussions about the late NBA legend. It all started at a high-end resort in Edwards, Colorado, the Lodge and Spa at Cordillera. It was June 30th, 2003, and like any other busy night at the resort, staff were hustling to accommodate their wealthy and famous guests. Among them was a young woman working at the front desk. She was just 19 years old, excited to be part of the resort's team, and even more excited when she learned that a major celebrity would be checking in that night. That celebrity was Kobe Bryant. At just 24 years old, he was already an NBA superstar, known for his insane talent on the court. He had come to Colorado for knee surgery, but instead of using his real name, he checked in under the alias Javier Rodriguez. His entourage, trying to keep things low-key, also used fake names, Joe Carlson and Mike Ortiz. Like any basketball fan, the young woman was thrilled at the chance to see Kobe in person, so she decided to stay late after her shift, hoping to meet him. She had no idea that this decision would change her life forever. Later that evening, sometime between 9:45 and 10 p.m., Kobe and his group arrived at the resort. The woman got her chance to interact with him when she escorted him to his room. During their brief conversation, Kobe asked her if she would come back in about 15 minutes to give him a private tour of the hotel. Feeling flattered, she agreed. At around 10:30 p.m., she returned to his room as promised, and they set off on the tour. They walked through the resort, visiting the spa, the exercise room, the outdoor pool, and the jacuzzi. A hotel bellman, who happened to be a high school friend of the woman, saw them together during this part of the tour. After checking out the amenities, they returned to Kobe's room. They sat down and started chatting. At first, everything seemed normal, but according to the woman's later account, the conversation took a turn that made her increasingly uncomfortable. Kobe asked her to open the jacuzzi for him, but she refused, explaining that her shift was over and she needed to go home. But Kobe kept pressing, trying to convince her to come back later. In an attempt to avoid conflict, she agreed, but in her mind, she had no intention of actually returning. As she stood up to leave, Kobe stood up too and asked for a hug. She said yes. What happened next, according to her, went from friendly to terrifying in a matter of moments. At first, they kissed. She later said this part was consensual. It lasted about 5 minutes. Then, she claimed, things escalated quickly. Kobe allegedly began touching her in ways she didn't want, grabbing her from behind and lifting her skirt. She said he took off his own pants and tried to force her to touch him. Feeling trapped, she told him she needed to leave. But according to her account, Kobe didn't stop. She described how he allegedly became more aggressive, blocking the door so she couldn't escape. Then, she said, he choked her. Not enough to leave marks, but enough to make her afraid. Every time she resisted, he reportedly tightened his grip on her neck. She later told investigators that Kobe kept asking if she was going to tell anyone. Desperate to get out of the situation, she said no, hoping that would make him stop. But according to her, he didn't stop. She claimed that Kobe eventually forced her over to the side of the couch. At this point, she said she was crying, saying no repeatedly, but it didn't matter. She described how he allegedly pulled up her skirt, took off her underwear, and sexually assaulted her. She later told police that the whole thing lasted about 5 minutes, during which she felt completely helpless. When it was over, she said Kobe told her to fix her hair and wash her face before she left, and then, before she walked out the door, he reportedly told her not to tell anyone. The allegations rocked the sports world. Kobe Bryant, the golden boy of the NBA, was suddenly at the center of a serious criminal case. His fans were in shock. The media went into a frenzy. The case dragged on for months, turning into one of the biggest celebrity scandals of the 2000s. The young woman later decided not to testify and the criminal charges were dropped. However, Kobe settled a civil lawsuit with her out of court, reportedly for millions of dollars. He always maintained that the encounter was consensual, but the case left a permanent mark on his legacy. Now, more than 20 years later, the controversy is back in the spotlight. The upcoming documentary will re-examine the case, featuring never-before-heard police interviews and new perspectives. Some fans believe Kobe's past should be left alone, while others argue that the full story deserves to be told. Either way, Kobe, the making of a legend is bound to reignite discussions about one of the most complicated chapters in his life. Whether you see him as an icon, a flawed human being, or something in between, one thing is certain, this story is far from forgotten. One of the most talked about moments came when reports surfaced that he had purchased an extravagant 8-carat purple diamond ring for his wife, Vanessa Bryant. The ring, allegedly worth around $4 million, was widely believed to be an apology gift in response to the scandal that had put their marriage under intense public scrutiny. Whether it was a genuine gesture of love or a desperate attempt at damage control, the ring quickly became the center of attention. Naturally, the public had plenty to say about it. In the midst of the controversy, Kobe made a heartfelt public apology, admitting his mistakes and expressing deep regret for the pain he had caused Vanessa. It was a rare moment of vulnerability for the basketball superstar, who was typically seen as confident and composed. While words carried weight, he knew that actions spoke louder, and soon after, he followed up with an extravagant display of devotion. In an effort to mend their relationship and prove his commitment, he turned to a grand, sparkling symbol of love and reconciliation, what would soon be known as the apology ring. And just like that, a simple piece of jewelry became a legendary celebrity story. But this wasn't just any ring, it was a masterpiece. The centerpiece was an 8-carat fancy, purple diamond, an uncommon and luxurious choice. The color itself was significant, as purple is often associated with royalty and wealth, perhaps mirroring the grand, larger-than-life nature of their relationship. Every detail of the ring was carefully crafted, capturing a mix of strength, elegance, and resilience, qualities that Kobe and Vanessa's marriage had been built on. It wasn't just an apology gift, it was a statement. When news of Vanessa Bryant's apology hit the headlines, it was as if a bomb had dropped in the world of celebrity gossip. The media went into a frenzy with tabloids, news outlets, and entertainment reporters all scrambling to cover every angle of the story. A multi-million-dollar ring given as a makeup gift, it was a dream story for entertainment journalists. The sheer extravagance of it all made people stop and talk, not just about the ring, but about the Bryant's relationship itself. It was luxury, love, and drama all rolled into one. The public had mixed reactions. On one hand, many were fascinated by the sheer opulence of the ring. It was dazzling, rare, and something only a select few of the world could afford. People admired it, talked about it, and in some cases even dreamed of owning something similar. The fact that such a grand gesture was tied to a real-life love story made it all the more compelling. The ring wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It became a symbol of forgiveness, commitment, and the lengths people might go to in order to fix their mistakes. It was the kind of story that made people wonder, can love...
Actually, the traffic wasn't as bad as I thought. It's because it's later, yeah.
No matter how rare or expensive, truly healed the wounds of betrayal. Was this just another case of a celebrity using wealth to smooth over personal problems? Many people saw it as a superficial attempt to buy forgiveness, rather than a meaningful step toward reconciliation. The debate raged on, with some defending Kobe's intentions, while others remained skeptical. In Hollywood, love and money are often tangled together. As the media obsessed over the ring and what it meant for Kobe and Vanessa's marriage, an even more shocking revelation surfaced: a murder for hire plot against Kobe Bryant's accuser in his trial. Details emerged suggesting that there had been an attempt to silence her permanently, raising serious questions about how far some were willing to go to protect Kobe's reputation. This revelation added another dark layer to it.
Okay, enough of Kobe, man. I'm not really a Kobe fan. Said to check out what's going on in Far Car. Let's see here.
My dragon's cool as hell, bro. I love it, dude. I love it, man. It's awesome, bro.
제가 골프 때는 장난보다 아니라서 그러면은
We have to go to the blue session. We can't just do it here. We can't just do it here.
Maybe we can go to.
We can't just figure this all out here. Like military or this one?
He wants to delete the military base.
Delete it?
Yeah.
Okay, see you.
Yeah, see you and it's a beach here.
Okay, yeah.
네네네 알겠습니다. 그렇게 하겠습니다.
알겠습니다. 네네네 알겠습니다. Like you're getting arrested or something.
Yes, maybe utility beauty or yes, no problem. Maybe leave this place.
383.36.
Leave with the new is better. Yes, wow. Go back to grandma.
6.
Grandma?
Freaking apartment. Apartment BB.
What? Sleep? Yeah. Maybe leave is better because no feeling coming.
Okay, it's behind 334.
Yeah, it's okay. Yes, it's okay, Paul.
It just became, I had to stent them.
I just wanted 4 hours of sleep, bro. That's all I wanted.
So what happened? They got detained by the police because they were filming on the beach, which is a military location.
How did they find their body? How did they find us?
I don't know. Maybe Murat is a spy. You know, North Korea spy. You.
Right.
One PM 30 minutes. Yeah, 1:30. Yeah. Yeah, last Friday. Yes. 1 PM, yeah, 1:30. Yeah.
Those guys are really dumb shits, man.
Red Russo, you wanna dance? You wanna dance? Me? Okay. Thank you, Red Russo. Thank you. Thank you, Russo. Thank you, Red Russo. I can dance now.
That stops at that? I think so. Going to the college where Obama went to college. He studied at Occidental. Yeah, I heard Vitelli got arrested. Man, they're really making live streamers look bad. I don't know if Kick should demonetize them or something. I don't know. don't know who Lester is, but I know who Sly Kane is. But I know who Sly Kane is. Student?
Maybe so. Yes. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. What?
Supposed to be where?
Okay. Wait.
Let's see here. Where's she at? Edmund Hall. Where the fuck is Edmund Hall at?
It's Ken. Oh, this is a city.
Hello.
No sun? Yeah.
Military base.
Yeah.
No signs.
Yeah.
How do we know? They were saying it was a law. No one ever said that to us. The law of what the military said. Remember that one sign that said no comment on like the back and the corner behind the you should have that on the road. All like the little observation points on the look up. Basically the tank slowly shell shift. And the base near the sea. But mostly, I assume most of the beach, to be honest.
잠시만요.
30만 원으로 판매하고 뭐 둘이나 이런 걸 판매할 건지 아니면 이분들 정식 상관처를 넘길 건지 그걸 좀 저희가 뭐 군시설에 대한 판단할 수는 없으니까 이렇게 할 수 있어요.
그러니까 이제 한이 해변에서 그 보초 그거랑 이제 한이 해변 그것만
한이 해변만 찍으셨던 문제는 아니고
네.
그 한이 해변이랑 그 이제 군사 시설에 대한 이런 같은 걸 촬영하셨던 것들이 이제 문제가 될 수 있어서 네 그런 부분들에 대해서 어제 일단은 고지를 해드렸었고 그리고 그럼에도 불구하고 어제 야간에 또 촬영됐다는 어떤 저희가 군사 시설에 대한 그 보고가 들어와서 저희가 그래서 확인을 하는 겁니다. 일단 그래서 확인하는 거에 대한 거는 그거고 그리고 그 이후에 저희가 조치를 해야 될 거는 그래서 이 촬영하신 분들의 어떤 한 것들이 있는지를 확인하는 게 첫 번째 그리고 그것들을 확인을 해서 이제 플레이 시설에서 어떤 뭐 문제가 될지 안 될지를 판단하시는 과정이 남아 있는 거죠. 그래서 제가 봤을 때는 저희가 어학자원들은 아닙니다. 그래가지고 먼저 이분들이 좀 당황스러우실 것 같은데 어떻게 보면 그냥 관광하러 왔다가 지금 문제가 먼저 사전에 고지를 좀 부탁드리고.
네, 알겠습니다. 이게 어저께 이후로 이제 저희가 이제 자기만 하고 뭐 다른 거는 안 갔거든요. 다른 데는 안 갔거든요.
네, 어제 제가 말씀드렸던 그
야간 거기만 끝내 거기
신기해서 찍었다.
네,
그 외에는 보시고.
네네네.
그럼 일단 그것도 한번 보여주시고 촬영부터 보여주시고 일단 그 내용부터 그 배경이 있는 것부터 좀 당황스러우실 것 같아서 먼저 고지를 좀 해주시면 감사합니다.
예, 알겠습니다. Okay. Maybe yesterday it's a military place.
Yeah, I did not realize that. I respect the Black Dragon, man. We love it. Like, really got like mad respect for you guys, and we didn't realize it was illegal.
We're just going around.
이게 불법인지 몰랐.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize it was like a security breach, and I did not notice that.
Right.
We'll never do that again.
We have to check something if you're.
Of course.
Yeah, right. So.
You guys need a passport? You guys need something? Like what?
Yeah, yesterday VOD check. VOD.
VOD?
Yeah.
VOD.
Oh, the VOD. Okay.
Oh, right.
Yes.
I voted though.
Yeah, it's okay. This guy is 이 친구는 안 찍었어요.
네. 상관없어요.
예.
Okay.
You go home.
What do they?
yesterday, let's say beach. 예. 네네.
So are you going to check this here or
네, 알겠습니다.
어제 그 항의 촬영하신 분은
이 친구랑.
Is it cool we do this here? We can do this here?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Sure.
Yeah. 40-hour bond.
이게 찾는데 좀 시간이 걸려가지고 어저께 좀 길게 방송을 해서 자는 것도 하고 이렇게 해서.
You want to watch it? 14 hours, bud. It's that one right there. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. But I can skip when I'm in the island if you want. I think we're on.
지금 말씀을 하시는 게 이런 이 자료들을 보시고 이걸 촬영하시는 관계자분들만 이거에 관련돼서 조사를 해야 된다고 합니다.
거기 가서요?
네, 아마 그럴 것 같아요. 그래서 세부적인 내용은 앞으로 어떻게 해야 된다라는 거는 제가 확실히 몰라서 그거 확인하자마자 알려드릴 거고 이거에 대해서 이 촬영과 관계된 관계자분들만 조사 대상.
Do you remember Virginia Giuffre? Virginia was the young woman who accused Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein of sexual assault. She's the one that's in that notorious picture where she's hugging Prince Andrew. If you don't remember, just give you a little bit of a flashback. And then I'm going to tell you what has apparently happened to her as of recent. Strange things are going on, folks. Just a reminder.
A U.S. court has just revealed a settlement agreement between convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein and Virginia Giuffre, and it could affect Giuffre's civil suit against Prince Andrew. She says she was trafficked by Epstein and forced to have sex with his friends, including Prince Andrew. And she says the prince knew she was underage. He has always strongly denied all these allegations.
He denied those allegations, but as you guys can see there, the picture kind of obviously they're hugging each other there. She was underage in that picture. Why was he hanging out with her? What was going on there? What is a whole ass grown man doing hanging out with an underage girl at that point in time? But remember, Prince Andrew being who he is, I mean, come on, they have a way of making sure that people like him are going to be protected and that he will get out of any type of mess there is in front of him. But he was never held responsible.
He says the prince knew she was underage. He has always strongly denied all these allegations. The 2009 settlement
accordingly, it could not have appropriately been brought as part of this settlement agreement, and hence it's not covered. That's what.
Pause here for a second. So this is something that I always question and wanted to point out, right? Like Prince Andrew should have been brought up on criminal charges, right? Not just this civil suit. Ghislaine Maxwell was brought up on criminal charges. Epstein brought up on criminal charges, and then he disappears. I think we all know about that. And then, but Prince Andrew just seemed to skirt on by. And I've always saw it this way. People say, well, there's a civil suit, and if the victim wins the civil suit, then everyone knows that the accused is guilty. Not necessarily. But he was not brought up on these criminal charges. That's something to hold on to that.
The lawyers will be arguing about from a technical standpoint. Now, of course, her attorneys will be Prince Andrew's attorneys will be saying, hey, that's absurd. He could have been named as a co-defendant in the case, just as Maxwell was named as a co-defendant.
Sure. What if Ghislaine Maxwell, who was found guilty on 5 of 6 charges against her, decides, for instance, to talk about anything involving Prince Andrew and Virginia Giuffre? Could that affect Giuffre's civil suit against Prince Andrew despite the 2009 settlement that she signed?
I don't think it would affect Giuffre's civil suit. It would, of course, be that he could be charged, possibly, with criminal charges, depending upon, of course, what Maxwell has to say. You know, there are statute of limitations issues here in this case, and there are also issues with respect to some of the sexual conduct that's alleged, that the prince is alleged to have engaged in, was in London, and the laws are different in England than they are in the United States with respect to statutes of limitations and so forth.
Sure. And now, and we'll go ahead and pause it there. Now, I do want to go ahead and say this about Prince Andrew. From what I understand, this wasn't the first. From what I understand, word on the street is that the Virginia case with Prince Andrew wasn't like this was the first time that Prince Andrew had been accused of maybe being with someone who is underage. From what I understand and from what I read, Prince Andrew was kind of known for going after or targeting girls that were underage. This just happens to be the one that came forward, from what I read. Now, I wanted to give you a flashback about that so you have an understanding of who Virginia Giuffre is. Because now, something wild and crazy happened. And the moment I heard this story, people said to me, oh my God, it's Hillary again. And I think you'll see why. So check this out. Just the other day, Epstein and Prince Andrew accuse her, says she has days to live after a bus crash. So I think a lot of people saw this and were like, what is happening here? What happened here? So she wrote on social media, she has gone into kidney renal failure. I'll show you the actual post so you can see it for yourself. They've given me 4 days to live. Now let's get into the accident, right? So Virginia, who is a victim of Jeffrey Epstein, who once alleged she was sexually trafficked to Prince Andrew, says she has just days to live after being involved in a vehicle accident. Let's go ahead and take a look at that statement from her here. This is her Instagram. And here's a picture here. Obviously, that looks like a hospital bed to me. You can see here's the rail, the guard rail on the hospital bed that you see if you've ever been in a hospital or been next to a hospital bed. This is what she said. So check this out. This year has been the worst to start a new year, but I won't bore anyone with the details, but I think it's important to note that when a school bus driver comes at you driving 110 kilometers as we were slowing for a turn, that no matter what your car is made of, it might as well be a tin can. I've gone into kidney renal failure. They've given me 4 days to live, transferring me to a specialist hospital in urology. I'm ready to go, just not until I see my babies one last time. But you know what they say about wishes. In one hand, shit in one hand and wish in the other, and I guarantee it's still going to be shit at the end of the day. Thank you all for being the wonderful people of the world and for being a great part of my life. God bless you all, Virginia. Yeah, man. Weird, right? Kind of spooky post there. But what she posted there doesn't line up with what the accident report says. When we look at what the accident report says, this is the part that I think threw people into a tizzy here. It goes on to say, her father, Sky Roberts, commented on the post and said, Virginia, my daughter, I love you, and I'm praying for you to get the correct treatment to live a long and healthy life. If there is anything in this world I can do to help you, please let me know. My spirit is with you and holding your hand. Now, in a statement, Giuffre's representative said that she had been in a serious car accident and is receiving medical care in the hospital. She greatly appreciates the support and well wishes people are sending. Now, if you were like me, when you first heard about this accident, first thing I said is, well, somebody is trying to take out Virginia. That's the first thing I thought. Somebody is trying to take Virginia out. But listen to the report from the accident. Listen to this. Pull up here a little bit. A social media post from 4 weeks ago suggests that Giuffre was in Perth in early March. Western Australia police said on Tuesday there was a report of a minor crash between a school bus and a car in Nergaby, north of Perth, on March 24th at about 3 p.m. So, how do you end up in the hospital from a minor crash? Minor. Listen to this part. There's more. It goes on to say the collision was reported by the bus driver the following day. The car sustained approximately $2,000 worth of damage. There were no reported injuries as a result of the crash. There were no reported injuries as a result of the crash. So, what's up, man? What's happening here? If there were no injuries, why does Virginia say that she was injured in this accident and that she's in the hospital fighting for her life? Is this an episode of Black Mirror? Let's go on. WA police confirmed a 41-year-old woman was in the car. The Guardian understands that Giuffre presented to a Perth Hospital Emergency Department. That was on Tuesday, April 1st. Giuffre had been living in a home in Ocean Reef. This is a north suburb of Perth with her husband, Robert Giuffre, who purchased the property in late 2020. So, does that sound a little bit odd to you guys? A minor accident, but she ended up in the hospital? Who's to blame? And now there's more information, and this is where it gets even more weird. Now Giuffre is claiming this part. Jeffrey Epstein victim Virginia Giuffre offers new details after claiming she had just days to live after the bus crash. So let's get into this. This is the update. Virginia offered more details about the horror bus crash that she claims left her with just 4 days to live. A statement from Giuffre's spokesperson said to dispute the sex trafficking victim's assertion on Instagram Sunday that she was near death. Her spokesperson said that the mother of 3 was in serious condition at an Australian hospital. The new details came after police police in Western Australia, where the US-born Jufrey lives, said there were no reported injuries in the March 24th crash between Jufrey's car and a school bus outside Perth. So, excuse me. No reported injuries. Now her spokesperson is saying disregard the post that she made on Instagram. So if I were to make an educated guess here, it seems like to me she's trying to disappear. It seems like to me she's trying to go away. And maybe she thought I can use the accident and say, yes, because I was in an accident, and I can say, uh-oh, I'm seriously injured from this accident. I don't know if I'm going to make it. But it sounds like to me that Virginia is trying to disappear. It goes on to say here, let's go on. The new details came after we did the reported injuries, and then there's the picture there. However, a spokesperson for Jufrey has insisted that she was forced to go to the hospital after her condition worsened several days after the crash. But they said there were no reported injuries. Now, from my experience, you're always kind of told, like, if you get into a car accident, you should still go get checked out. But there's a difference between going and getting checked out and saying, I have 4 days to live. Like, there's a big difference there. And I've been in car accidents as well, right? So it didn't make sense. But listen to this. Virginia was banged up, bruised, and returned home. Following the collision, the spokesperson told Jufrey told the Post, the police did not have the resources to come to the scene of the accident at the time. They asked if anyone was injured and suggested that if they were, they should make their way to the hospital. So, you guys find this to be a little bit strange? Now, let's go back to the picture. Does she look okay to you? She don't look okay to me. So, if there were no injuries after the crash, what put her in this state? Where she said kidney failure. What put her in this state? These people, the victims, we don't know that they will ever really be safe. We really don't. They came forward, and that in itself is a risk. The school bus driver had a bus full of distraught children and left the scene to get them back, saying he would file a police report, which he did later. Concerning her Instagram post, Virginia thought that she had posted on her private Facebook page. The statement went on. I want to explain this to people who don't use either. Facebook and Instagram is connected, and sometimes if you're posting on Facebook, you can accidentally, like, oh, this will also post on Instagram, or if you're posting on Instagram and accidentally also post on Facebook if you're not paying close attention. So I kind of hate that merger between the two, by the way. But it wasn't something she wanted everyone to see. Apparently she thought she was posting this on her private Facebook page, so only the people who have access to that would see that, right? Now, listen to this. Today she remains in serious condition while receiving medical care. Jufrey, whose bombshell allegations that she had sex with Prince Andrew when she was underage, yada yada, claimed she had just a few days to live after suffering kidney failure. Alongside of a picture of her apparently laying in a hospital bed, which you guys saw that. There's a picture up there. So compare that to the picture of her in the hospital bed. So I think we all saw that. And then it goes into the statement that she left. They go on to say she's in really bad shape. She's very depressed. There's everything else she's been going through with a divorce and not being able to see her kids. So there's a little bit more to this story. And she says she misses her kids, so that tells you that she obviously apparently was not with her children at that point in time. This story is really strange, and you guys feel free to let me know what you think in the chat. I find this story to be very odd. And since there were no major injuries in the accident, what happened to Virginia Giuffre? Because her spokesperson is still confirming she is in the hospital. So what happened? Did someone come after her? Was she trying to end it all? You know, when people come forward against powerful people, that it's a huge risk. This is why a lot of times people don't do it. It's a big risk. It's not that you just have to deal with the trial. You just have to deal with the media. You can be a target, and your family can also be a target for the rest of your life. This is why a lot of times people don't speak up. And powerful people know this. Powerful people know that they can get away with shit. Strange story. Strange times. Who's to blame? Is it Virginia? Did Virginia try to do this to herself? Or is someone else after her? Hey guys, this was a savvy clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.
Must be something going on with Kick. Sign must be down here. Sign's down. It's really dark out. Got dark early. It's almost 8 o'clock. Jesus Christ. Yes, ma'am. Hey, what's up, Ricky Grimes? Just driving around, just doing some deliveries, but nothing so far. As I came back to Koreatown. Let's see here. I'm gonna probably shut the stream off because I've been on for about 2 hours. My battery's getting low. Alright guys, thanks for hanging out. I'm gonna shut off the stream because my battery's getting low and see if I can get some more deliveries. But peace out, peace.